name is Brian Schrager. Just briefly, I am a journalist here. I have been associated with USA Radio Network over the years until journalist for the Jerusalem Post. By way of context, many decades ago, I happened to also graduate with a master's in theology from Dallas Theological Seminary. But I'm a journalist today, so in any case, it's a pleasure to be with you. We've got bringing up all the panel at once. I'm going to call up a little bit about yeah, El, this is so great. I'm so glad to be able to do this with you. Can you hear me? Is this on? Okay, good. Louder? I'll hold it closer to my mouth. Thank you. So, yeah, El, you are the CEO of the International Fellowship of Christian Yesterday ran into pictures of the about you. So if you could just give us a brief introduction.
We represent Christians around the world, and we focus on the elderly and the orphans in Israel, the former Soviet Union. And thank God, praise God, we have over 600,000 I want to tell the Jewish people that they're not alone.
200 million, and from around the world, and
who give sacrifice, this larger vision of Christians and Jews coming together in 133, how good and pleasant it is when brethren come together in peace. A huge impact, and the knowledge here in Israel that even after you go back to Finland and to Korea and to all the places that you're coming from.
Most of your money then comes from Christian supporters. Yes. And this makes you an organization. You're actually building a bridge between Christians and Israel. Which we will
blessed memory. Around a week before he suddenly passed away, 3.5 years ago from a heart attack, there was an article in the newspaper. And he called me. He said, "Yael, did you see the article?" I said, "Yeah, I saw it." He said, "It was horrible." I said, "Ah, but that was a wonderful article. They spoke so good about the fellowship and our work, and they interviewed people who received the aid and showed the impact." He said, "But Yael, they called me a fundraiser. I'm not a fundraiser, I'm an educator, I'm a rabbi, I'm a bridge builder, I'm not a fundraiser." And so the way that we're able to make that impact of distributing, raising over $200 million a year is by recognizing that it's not about the humanitarian aid. That's what comes out of the Christian love for Israel. That's what comes out of effective bridge building. And when you're sponsoring in Israel over 400 organizations, we've built over 5,500 bomb shelters on the southern border. And there was actually an amazing thing that happened, that there were Christian tourists to Israel who went down south and went and saw the bomb shelters and met the people in Sderot and learned about the threats and the amazing technology in order to meet those threats. And Hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael, the guardian of Israel, neither slumbers nor sleeps. You see that down south. And a donor of the fellowship happened to go into the bomb shelter that they donated. And so this is the full circle of really making an effective difference between giving $25 from the safety of Chicago to protect the people of Israel and being able to see the impact in a tangible way.
We're going to move to Ukraine in a minute, but before we do, part of the title of this time together is Being a Light unto the Nations. And I'm wondering if you would be able to give us the Jewish understanding of what it means to be a light unto the nations, and perhaps how that relates to a concept our audience may or may not be familiar with, called tikkun olam, which is to repair the world, a very fundamental Jewish sensibility.
Okay, so you might not know this, but when you tell the Jewish people that they are the chosen people, or a light unto the nation, you might see some Jewish people get a little bit uncomfortable about that. Because it's something that it's not our own self-identity. It's something that when Christians come and bless Israel, and you say you're a light unto the nation, you are or legoyim, as we say in Hebrew. It was something that after 18 years of working with the Christian community and hearing, you're the chosen people, what does that mean to me? What does it mean to our nation? How can we articulate this huge responsibility to be a light into the nation in a way that's relevant for all of us? And Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach of blessed memory, he said, what does it mean to be the chosen nation? It means that the Jewish people were chosen to tell the world that they're chosen. And it's something that resonates so deeply as I learn about history and I see how the world has moved from one of idol worship, sacrificing children, accepting murder, the strong overcoming the weak. That was the world before Mount Sinai. And so when I look at how the world has progressed from the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai, God to Moses, Moses to the Jewish people, it's with this huge responsibility that you have to teach it to the world, that you have to affect the world. And what we see there is a responsibility that we all have taken on to bring the world to where we know it today. One that's focused on monotheism, of doing good, of tikkun olam, which means fixing the world. Now, you might not be able to say that in Hebrew. You could try, though. Tikkun olam. Great job. You did it. That's what you're doing, though. You're here because you want to fix the world. So whether the Jewish people identify as a light into the nations or the chosen people, it affects our actions, our responsibility to bring light, to help others, to go into Ukraine, to go into Ethiopia, to bring the Jewish people from all four corners of the earth home to Israel, escaping persecution, saving their lives, and bringing biblical prophecy to fruition, because that's what it means to be a light unto the nations. And so today, I see many lights unto the nations that aren't only from the Jewish people.
Being a light unto the nations, if I understand it, is, in the Jewish concept, a partnership with God, showing his light to the nations and being part of his redemptive work. Is that correct?
That sounds pretty good to me. Wikipedia. It's in everything that we do. I think all of us as people of faith can say that we are partners with God. Before I came on stage, I said, Hashem sfatai tiftach ufi agid hilatecha. Lord, open up my mouth so I can declare your praises. That no matter where you are in this world, no matter what you're doing, no matter how good of a deed you're doing, you have to have that intention of partnering with God in order to create the vessel of being effective in it.
Wonderful. We're going to focus a bit on Ukraine because there's been so much activity there since Russia invaded last February. I've had the privilege of being over with the IFCJ to Moldova a couple of times. It's remarkable what you're doing, what your organization is doing, would you please share with us not only what you're doing, but also now as we go into the winter, what's happening in Ukraine? I think it's a very problematic situation, yes?
Yeah, I'm going to take you back to 40 years first. How many people here have heard of Pat Boone, Jack Hayford, Pat Robertson? So it was around 40 years ago that my father, Rabbi Chiel Eckstein, partnered with them in order to bring the Jewish people home. Do you remember when the Iron Curtain fell?
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember when finally, for the first time, the Jewish people were able to come home? And the Jewish community was rallying around the world to bring them home. And the Christian community, with all those amazing leaders, came together and said, we want to be part of it. And so that's when we started our On Wings of Eagles program, where we've helped over 1 million Jewish people come home to Israel from all different countries. But what we saw was that there were those, the weakest, who were left behind, who couldn't come to Israel, the Holocaust survivors, the elderly, the sick, the orphans. And that's when we started our Isaiah 58 ministry. Now, fast forward now 35 years, and I feel like all of it was leading up to this moment. There's a Hebrew saying, Sof ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. The end result is the product of the first thought. And so that first thought that my father had 40 years ago to help the Jews in Ukraine, in the former Soviet Union, is coming to fruition now, when for the first time in many of our lifetimes, we have Jewish refugees in Europe. You have 80,000 Jewish people inside Ukraine who right now don't have electricity. And you might not know that the electricity is connected to water. If there's no electricity, there's no water. -5-degree temperatures. Just last week, we had one of our board members who went into Odessa, into Ukraine. Right now, we have the chairman of our board on his way into Ukraine. And what he saw was a Holocaust survivor who, when he was 5 years old, held his mother after she was shot. She died in his arms during the Holocaust. And now, in his final years in Ukraine, he's in an old age home in Odessa without electricity, without running water, which means you can't cook food. And he went and brought a generator and a blanket and food and heating and said, this is from Christians around the world who love you. So the message of that full circle of going in the most vulnerable times and saying 70% of the Nazis might have identified as Christians, but as all of my Christian friends said, they weren't very Christ-like. That now you're coming in and saying, we are here for you in your most vulnerable moments in a tangible way to give you hope for the future.
Wonderful. We're going to have, hopefully, a little bit of time. I've been admonished to make sure we keep to 45 minutes, which we will. So I think we will end about 12:15. Is that okay? All right, good. And perhaps also we can later come back to the question of what might be regarded by some as the scandal of Christian involvement with Israel, making donations. Is there an ulterior motive? And is that true, or is it not true? Is there an ulterior motive to convert Jews, for example? So we'll come back to that. That's just a little idea to plant with you. Now, let's call up our other board members, our other members of the panel. Aviv Ezra of Moshav, and Roman Polanski of the Jewish Agency. Are you guys here? There's Roman. Not. So, Roman, I saw your name earlier, and I thought, the movie director.
I'm not an Oscar winner, and I'm not a criminal, but FBI is not after me, so it's okay.
I'm very glad that you're here. Thank you. You are with the Jewish Agency, and it's probably the biggest, it is the largest Jewish nonprofit in the world. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. And but I suspect that many of us, because we're not Jewish, don't know about the Jewish Agency, how big it is, and the many, many things it's involved in doing. So would you just share with us a little bit about the Jewish Agency?
The Jewish Agency was established in 1929, and this is the really biggest Jewish NGO in the world. Actually, the Jewish Agency established the State of Israel, and the chairman of the Jewish Agency, David Ben-Gurion, then became Prime Minister of Israel, and we have a room in our building where David Ben-Gurion was sitting there, and we bring people there, and we show them, here is the room where actually the State of Israel was established and was ruled from this room. We are dealing with Jewish education, with Aliyah, with Jewish young leadership, with humanitarian programs, with informal and formal education, camps, all over the world. And of course, we are dealing also in the former Soviet Union, in Eastern Europe, and I am as a responsible for Jewish Agency programs in this region, in the former Soviet Union, in Eastern and Central Europe and in Germany. I'm very proud to be part of this and actually to be there in the field, seeing what we are doing and actively participating in this.
Wonderful. Aviv, it's been a pleasure to dialogue with you on WhatsApp. It's the first time we've met. Nice to meet you. And Moshav. Moshav is also a very, very huge organization, but I suspect many here don't know about it. Just make sure the mic is close to your mouth and we'll see if it's working.
Yes, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me here today, and it's such a pleasure and an honor to represent the Foreign Ministry and Moshav specifically. Well, I was listening to Yael's introduction about the amazing work that the fellowship is doing, and I said, and we talked about Tikkun Olam, we talked about repairing the world, and Or Goim, making a difference around the world. And I represent Moshav, which is Israel's Agency for International Development Cooperation.
A government agency.
Excuse me?
You're a government agency.
A government agency, part of the foreign ministry. And actually, I was taking it to what Yael said about interpreting and articulating what does that mean, making a difference around the world in terms of bringing the Jewish values and the Jewish, I would say, added values. And look, obviously, there's a lot of focus, and this is what the State of Israel is all about, focusing on the Jewish people. But what's really amazing, and this is the best-kept secret in Israel, maybe the second best-kept secret in Israel, but the best-kept secret in Israel is Israel, through Moshav, has been working since 1958 around the world in 140 countries in bringing people here to Israel to share our know-how, our technologies, our expertise from the early 60s, end of the 50s, in various sectors around the world, and making sustainable, long-term difference that we could obviously elaborate more during this. But it's very important to understand that this is a government decision to take outside, with a focus on Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, and more, Israel's capabilities of Tikkun Olam and sharing the capabilities.
And you're not just helping people in terms of giving them things. You're actually training third world countries to build up their own technology and agriculture and other areas, yes?
100%. 80% of what we do is capacity building. Maybe 20 to 50% is humanitarian aid. We've been extremely focused in 2022 in Ukraine. We could talk about that. 50% of my time in the last year was focused on Ukraine. From an historically unprecedented deployment of a civilian field hospital that the State of Israel has deployed into Ukraine, the only country in the world, not America, not Germany, not Japan, the only country in the world, government country, to deploy a civilian field hospital in Ukraine was the State of Israel. We're extremely proud about it. But that was just 15, thank you. That was just 15, it's not my mother there, I promise you. That was just 15% of 20% of our regular year. The majority of the time is what we call capacity building, where we, bring graduates and trainees to Israel. By the way, as we speak right now, we have 3 in-house training centers and 10 that we are outsourcing. And we bring them here, various sectors from AgTech, WaTech, healthcare, innovation, technology, women empowerment, gender equality. One of the founding fathers, if not the founding father, is a founding mother, which is the former Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister of Israel, Golda Meir. She inaugurated in the late 50s, 1958, a center that you're all invited to come to, which is called the Carmel Center in Haifa, which is focused specifically on women empowerment and gender equality from the early 60s. That's a little bit before the Me Too revolution. Unbelievable. Hundreds of, actually, as I mentioned, 350,000 trainees from the late 50s, early 60s until today. And then they go back to their home countries. And that is where we create the second pillar of our work, which is the projects. And I can elaborate about, I don't want to dominate the entire conversation, but we can elaborate about amazing things that we're doing in South Sudan, in Chad, in Guatemala, in Ethiopia, in Nepal, and across the board.
And that, let me encourage you when you get a chance to Google these organizations. They have excellent information about what they're doing and where they're doing it online. And I've got to tell you, Roman, the Jewish Agency's article in Wikipedia is superb. Not all Wikipedia articles are good, but the one about the Jewish Agency is not only, well, extensive, but it's very clear, well-written. So kudos on that. If you want to learn about the Jewish Agency, Wikipedia, in this case, is a good place to go. The title of our time together is From Ukraine to Hurricane. And when I first heard that, I thought hurricane might be metaphorical, but you actually, you actually are going into countries where there have been hurricanes and typhoons. And actually, it's been rather amazing and renowned what you've done. So if you could just briefly touch on that, and then we want to move to Ukraine and talk about what's going on in Ukraine, what you've done, and the situation now as we are in the winter in Ukraine.
First of all, I think that it's not from Ukraine to hurricane. I think that hurricane is in Ukraine. Yeah. And not only in Ukraine, the whole world, and we can see it. I can tell you that being there, I remember this 24th of February, waking up in Budapest and just understanding that the world got crazy. Just it was unbelievable. And to see all these people, I were on the borders. I saw these people. We helped them, bringing them from these war zones in Ukraine to the border, and it was very, very difficult because there was no buses. The drivers were not ready to go to these bombed zones. There was no fuel. We had to organize accommodation in 4 countries around Ukraine, in Hungary, in Poland, in Romania, and in Moldova. Of course, we did it together and in tight cooperation with fellowships. And then we had to find a solution how to send these people to Israel, because there were thousands of people. And of course, fleeing from Ukraine, from their places, they didn't get all these documents that they needed in order to get to Israel. And as you know, in order to get to Israel, you have to get visa. And there was not enough consuls in this place. So we established a system which was called Express Aliyah. Express Aliyah, in this system, it was enough for people just to tell us that they have some relatives in Israel, or they participated in our programs or in community programs, and they could go to Israel, and then in Israel to accomplish their process of Aliyah. Our motto was and is not Olim waiting for planes, but planes waiting for Olim. And this way, we brought to Israel, again, together with our friends from fellowships, we brought to Israel more than 14,000 Jews from Ukraine, and now we are speaking about 36,000 from Russia. This is another story, but this is an unfolding story and a very important one. We had to help these people with purely basic needs. I saw these people with 2 women. Actually, I can call it women's exodus, because men, they were not allowed to leave Ukraine, ages 18-65, because they were drafted to the army. So women with their small children, with some pet, cat or dog, and with elderly parents. Some of them, this is the second time of kind of, I don't want to compare it to Holocaust, but they were in Holocaust before. And, you know, to be on the border and to see this old lady, 94 years old, just immersed in her thoughts and understanding that she remembers what was there in this place so many years ago. By the way, I was born near Odessa. And for me, this is a very personal and very tragic story. And if somebody, 10 years ago, would have asked me what was more probable, the war between Russia and Ukraine or Martian invasion on Earth, I wouldn't have hesitated for a moment. Of course, Martian invasion. And this is unbelievable, is happening. And I can tell you that I'm in touch with our people there in the field, and what Yael told us about suffering of people there, about cold and no water and no electricity and no shelters, they come to Israel, and it's, with all these problems that we have in Israel, and we have many problems, but it's kind of heaven. I think that this is a privilege to be part of this story and to help these people in this historic moment.
Wonderful. Aviv, is the hospital still in operation?
So the hospital was an immediate response from the State of Israel, directed directly from the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister. Literally, we got a phone call in the middle of the night from the Director General of the Foreign Ministry, and he instructed us to start the mechanism of a civilian field hospital. Now, why is that unprecedented? Because we got serious people here that could Google very fast that Israel has already deployed field hospitals around the world. But it was always deployed by the military. The Israeli IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, would deploy field hospitals to places that were struck by natural disasters. Could be floods, could be earthquakes, could be Turkey, could be Haiti. But here we had a different situation. Here, Israel was focused on a location where there's a war zone. And Defense Minister Gantz has responded to the Prime Minister by saying, I cannot deploy Israeli military with Israeli uniforms into a war zone, because the point was not to deploy it on the outskirts of Ukraine or on Poland, because we don't need hospitals in Poland. They have enough hospitals in Poland. The point was to get inside to Ukraine itself. And that, I think, demonstrates exactly how we articulate what we could do in terms of added value, because nobody was willing to go inside. Literally, they were bombing close to the area where we deployed. So coming back to that phone call, Director General has asked me, do you know how to deploy a civilian field hospital? I said to him, the last time I did it was never. And it took us about 3 weeks to combine all the relevant players from the healthcare system in Israel, Sheba hospitals and many other hospitals, of course the Ministry of Health, Health Ministry of Israel, and to touch upon topics that were very small. I'm not going to bother you with details, but you need to make sure that people are safe, security. You need to make sure that there's kosher food for the doctors, et cetera, even insurance. But to your question, we have managed in 3 weeks to deploy a team of about 210 staff members, doctors, nurses, social workers, technicians, etc., and to deploy in Ukraine, by the way, of course, in total coordination with the Ukrainians and with the Russians. We made sure that the Russians knew where we were located because of very strong incentive, as you might understand.
Right.
And with these 210 personnel, we have deployed the hospital for almost 2 months, month and a half, a little bit more than that, 3 cycles, getting people in, getting people out. And at the end, the bottom end result is that the State of Israel has managed to deliver a full, I would say, a full approach and help to 7,000 Ukrainian patients. A lot of them are refugees that were on the way out from Kiev. A lot of them are also locals. And to leave also, as you mentioned, what we call train the trainers. We left many of our know-hows and some of our technologies when we left with the local medical teams in order to create an ongoing follow-up, including an online follow-up, including consultations, and last but not least, today, December, we have 4 courses with social workers, with people that deal with PTSD, with people from the education system, all of them from Ukraine, coming to Israel, some of them right here in Jerusalem, to implement some of our models back in Ukraine.
But if I may only to add that I visited this hospital in Ukraine and it's absolutely incredible. And only I want to stress one very important fact. It wasn't for Jews. It was for Ukrainians. And this is actually to be light for the nations, to fix the world.
I had a chance to be...
100%, just to make sure the target audience is totally not Jews. I mean, the majority of them, we don't know. I mean, we don't even care. Whoever comes and had the need, you're right. But it was not designated towards Jews coming out of Ukraine. Not at all.
Wonderful. I had a chance to be in Moldova in April with the fellowship and was at the border of Ukraine and met refugees as they were coming across. And it was very, very moving. And then to also witness how the Jewish Agency, I don't know that I got to see Moshav in action, but I saw the Jewish Agency and the fellowship working with refugees as they came across, providing a place for them to have shelter, sleep, eat, have food, and those who qualified to make aliyah, to immigrate to Israel. So is this
Just for the record, we deployed on the 5 locations bordering with Ukraine. Half of our personnel that are located in the diplomatic corps here in Israel were deployed to the 5 points, including consuls that gave all the relevant visas, all the relevant procedures. We invested a lot of budget to actually build receiving stations over there. So Moshe was definitely on those. We're very,
the logistics were mind-boggling, getting all this to work together. So Yael, I wonder if you could give us an idea of what's happening right now. Are we still having people immigrate to Israel, or is it more going into Ukraine and helping those who have needs there?
So, Brian, I have to say, as I'm listening to Roman and Aviv, the biblical verse that's coming to my mind is Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah udvar Hashem Yerushalayim. From Zion goes out the word of God. And this is the word of God going out from Zion, whether it's the Israeli government or semi-governmental organizations or private organizations, that this is literally God's ratzon, God's will and desire in order to help his people, to save his people in innovative ways, going out from Jerusalem, from Israel, in order to save lives and be there for Jews and non-Jews alike. And it's that innovation from Zion that I think we heard John Medved speak about in different capacities, but that you'll see in every single area of life inside of Israel and out is this innovation that comes from Jerusalem. So as we're talking about this, I'm remembering the beginning of the war. I was in Kiev just 3 days before the war broke out, surrounded by 100,000 Russian troops, and we set up emergency aid for those first few days of war before they could restock. And when we had to get the Jewish people out of Ukraine, together with our partners at the Jewish Agency, the airspace in Moldova was closed. There was nobody in the airport. It was closed. But that innovation of God's word, that God can do anything, there's no closed airports for God, of finding a way to make that possible, we ended up getting humanitarian permission to fly a plane from Israel packed with 15 tons of humanitarian aid into Moldova, where we brought in the staff from the airport just to open it for our humanitarian flights, let off the humanitarian aid that went directly into Ukraine, loaded it with new olim, with Jewish refugees from Ukraine, and brought them home to Israel, and then turned around and did it again. So that's the innovation.
And how many
from
flights
Jerusalem.
has the fellowship done bringing olim back?
Over 100.
Wow. Very good. If you have a burning question, there's one burning question here. And so we'll take just a minute for a burning question. And please, if you would, because of time, keep your question to a question and without much embellishment. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for what you do. Because of the rise of
Who are you? Introduce yourself, please.
Sure. John Riley, American Family Radio, United States. Because of the rise of anti-Semitism in the United States, first question, are you seeing an increase in immigration, to the United States? And the second question, maybe Roman or anybody else on the panel, but there have been reports in the media about Russia wanting to shut down the Jewish agency in that country. Can you give us an update on that situation? And maybe the status of the persecution of Jews in Russia.
That's for you.
That's you.
No. First one and the The second one.
The second one,
Both?
yeah, both. Half.
Let's start with the second one. Look, now we have an issue. I can define it like this, with some legal procedures in Russia. The first trial was in August, then it was postponed to September, then to November, now it's December. In a few days we will have next trial. And we, meanwhile, are doing everything in order to satisfy Russian court. We actually did it during all these years, but now we are doing it not 100%, not 200%, but 300%. We established a call center in Moscow, and we're changing our system. I'm rather optimistic because I think that it will be okay, and I think that in any case we see this rise of Aliyah from Russia, and it's not connected to legal or other issues. It's connected to global and socio-economic situation, political situation, and all this. So we see this increase of Aliyah from Russia, and we think that it will continue. And I hope that in several, maybe weeks, months, we will see the situation better in Russia with the Jewish Agency as well.
I know the situation in Russia is very sensitive, so we want to be cautious about what we say here right now, because this is actually in process. It's something to pray about, actually, very much. It's urgent. I think one of your questions was, the first one was, are we seeing an increase in immigration to Israel? Is that what you meant? Yes. From the United States to Israel, okay. Any of you?
I'm not aware about increase or significant increase of Aliyah from the United States. I do know about significant increase from the former Soviet Union, from Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia. I don't think that right now it's connected to anti-Semitism there. It's connected to, in each Aliyah we have, in my view at least, 4 major factors. One is push factor. The second one is pull factor. The third one is personal situation, kids, parents, and all this. And the fourth one, the desire to be in Jewish state and to be part of Jewish history in the Jewish state. So in this situation, push factor is so strong, so significant, that it itself moves people very, very quickly. Now, at the same time, I don't rule out that deterioration in the whole world and also in the situation between different countries, I don't want to go to specifics, could also bring anti-Semitism up in this region. But we will see. By the way, I can tell you that during all these years before the war, Putin was one of the pro-Semitic, philo-Semitic presidents, the most philo-Semitic president in the former Soviet Union. And as I can say, we hope that it will continue like this, but who knows?
We are running out of time, so I want to make sure we get a couple of important things in. I'd like each of you to take like 2 minutes to mention something that perhaps has not been mentioned you'd like to bring up. And how can journalists here learn more about you in writing their stories and doing their broadcasts about Israel and what you do? So contact information, something you'd like to mention about yourself, and where we can go to learn more. So I'd like to begin with Aviv, and then Roman, and then Yael.
Thank you. I think if I need to flag something, it goes back to the beginning of what I said, that it's the best kept secret in Israel. We are a very strong, Mashav, which is actually an acronym from the 50s that translates to International Cooperation. You cannot brand that in the world of TikTok of 2023. One of the things I try to do immediately is to try to change the brand. However, we have a strong brand of Mashav, which is M-A-S-H-A-V, in the developing world, but it is not enough, A, within Israel, and B, within the international community. And if there's an ask that I have for you, is A, to check out who we are, either vis-a-vis the just average Google or vis-a-vis the social media. We are 100% transparent in everything we do. Everything is online, and research it. And then our question to you, or our ask towards you, is if you can amplify it as much as we can. We are open to discuss it, to talk about it. I just came back from COP27. We had multi-layer of requests for cooperation, bilaterally, trilaterally, multilaterally, UN agencies, USAID, USAID, GIZ, JICA. This is where the world is going now. The narrative of the conflict is not something that the majority of the world is focused on. The narrative of global development, climate change, etc. This is where we're going, and Israel has a lot to offer.
Very good. Roman?
I think that there is no substitute to be in the field. And we can talk here in more and more and more, but to be in the field, to see these people, to touch them, to be, and you know, you understand there in 5 minutes what we cannot understand here in 2 hours. So be in the field, look at these people, hearing their stories firsthand, not as we retell them, but be there. It's absolutely, absolutely different. We hosted a lot of missions in Poland and in Hungary and all these countries, and always I can tell you that people come and then they go back. It's absolutely, absolutely different.
I assume journalists here, then you have an opportunity as journalists to visit Moldova, Ukraine, and actually firsthand see what's going on.
Moldova, Ukraine, Poland, Hungary, all these countries where we are together, we are operating, and you can see these people, you can speak with these people, and after all, what is important, these people, our operation is only to serve them.
As someone who's done this, I can bear witness to what he's saying. It makes all the difference in the world to actually be there and meet these people firsthand. Yael?
Thank you so much, Brian. I think as we approach Hanukkah, which is the Festival of Lights,
Starting Sunday, right?
starting Sunday, I think as we talk about anti-Semitism and all the darkness in the world, that our role here, our responsibility is really to bring light. What we learn about Hanukkah is it's not enough just to curse the darkness, but we have to bless the light. And so I think as Christian journalists around the world who cover so much of the darkness of the world as journalists, Israel is not only a light unto the nations, but I see that silent majority in America, in Canada, of millions of Christians who stand with Israel, who stand with these values that we all cherish, who are continuing with the legacy that has been built up until now, that within this darkness I just see so much light, and I hope that you'll continue to cover that as well.
And may I, are you, the three of you, going to be available to journalists here for a little while? So if you want to do an interview with any one of these wonderful people, you are welcome to first come, first serve. So thank you so much. You have been a wonderful panel, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.